Hi everyone, this is Graham Gerdeman, and today on Nashville Birder we're going to talk about winter finches, eruptions, and some things we can do to tell these birds apart in our backyard. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe and share it with a friend. What is a finch anyway? Well, true finches are members of a very large family of birds called family Fringillidae. With a few very specialized exceptions, finches all have stout conical bills adapted for eating seeds and small nuts, and they often have colorful plumage. This also describes the exotic finches of Australia and the Old World, which aren't closely related and don't occur natively in North America. It would also seem to describe the northern cardinal, which just landed in the background of this shot, but cardinals are actually a member of their own family, and they are not finches. Here in Tennessee and most of the southeastern United States, we have two species of finch which occur year-round and are local nesters, the American goldfinch and the house finch. Both of these species come to feeders readily and are common backyard birds. American goldfinch males in the breeding season are vividly yellow, with sharp black wings and cap. The female is less colorful, but still quite yellow. She lacks the black cap and has less contrasting black in the wings. In winter, they're both more drab and less yellow and more brownish. The male generally maintains a brighter yellow throat and wing bars, but males and females often look very similar this time of year. Goldfinches always have a plain, unstreaked sides and breast. House finches, on the other hand, do have streaks on the breast and sides. The females are diffusely streaked and entirely brownish. Males are reddish to red-orange on the head, breast, and rump. This color varies, and some are even orange or yellow. These yellow variants are much more common in some western areas and states. The color depends on their diet, and adult males can apparently be yellow one year and red the next. House finches are originally native to the deserts of Southwest America, but were introduced here in the East as a cage bird. When winter comes and temperatures plummet in the north, several other species of finch move south. Now, some of these birds occur annually as far south as Tennessee, but they're usually in relatively small numbers. In years when food sources are particularly scarce in the frozen north, these winter birds push down in much greater numbers, sometimes huge numbers. We call these eruption years. Now, as it pertains to birds, an eruption means a dramatic, irregular migration of large numbers of birds to an area where they aren't typically found, possibly at great distances from their normal ranges. Notice that's eruption with an I, not an eruption with an E, which is this or this. Pine siskins are generally one of the most abundant and regular eruptive finches in this area. As is the case with a number of more northern species, some pine siskins actually do occur year-round in locations of very high elevations of the southern Appalachian Mountains. And that includes parts of Tennessee and North Carolina, but their regular range is otherwise in the far northern U.S. and Canada, and at elevation along the much higher mountain ranges out west, even down into Mexico. Most winters, these tiny finches occur in small numbers across the state, but in eruption years, they can seem to be everywhere you look. Siskins are smaller than goldfinches and have a thin, pointed bill and notched tail. Notice, too, the heavily streaked breast, remembering that goldfinches never have a streaked breast. The base of the flight feathers and tail are yellow, but this varies from bird to bird, and sometimes the yellow is only seen in flight. Males tend to be more yellow than females, but this is not always the case, and we cannot generally sex pine siskins visually. An exception are what are called green morph birds, which have a green-yellow wash all over, and pronounced yellow in the undertail coverts. These birds also tend to be slightly larger, and they have been found to always be males. Statistically, roughly 1 out of 100 pine siskins, or 1% of the birds at your feeders, will be one of these green morphs. Siskins are also quite vocal, and you can learn to recognize their rising zipper-like song, as well as softer, shorter tew calls. Do you think you can tell a house finch from a pine siskin? Here's a female house finch lined up with pine siskins for you to try, and the male house finch is peeking in on the left. Notice right away that the house finch is a larger bird, and proportionally the head is much larger than the pine siskin. The female house finch's bill is significantly bigger and broader, not the needle-thin bill of the siskin. House finch does not have any yellow in the wing, and she's lacking the contrasting thin streaks on the back and the head. It may seem difficult or daunting at first, but once you practice with these birds, you can tell them apart at a glance. Another common eruption year finch presenting a bit more of an identification challenge for beginning birders here in the South is the purple finch, which is very similar to the house finch. Roger Torrey Peterson famously described the male purple finch as a sparrow dipped in raspberry juice, and that description is very helpful for remembering that its raspberry color extends through the back and the wings, and along the sides, areas which are not typically colored red in the house finch. It really does look like it's been dipped in dye, and most of us will generally agree that it's also really not purple. Purple finches are slightly larger, chunkier finches, and both the males and females have distinctly contrasting facial patterns compared to the much less contrasting faces of house finches. The female purple finch especially shows drastically more facial pattern than a female house finch. Look at the bold white eyebrow or supercilium and the white malar stripe which surrounds a dark brown cheek. It really stands out compared to the female house finch behind her with a really bland face by comparison. Sorry, house finch. Like the pine siskin, the purple finch has a strongly notched tail. Also note that the top of the purple finch's bill or culmen is very straight, as opposed to the culmen of the house finch, which is curved. This is an important field mark, and this angle also shows us another important field mark, that the purple finch lacks all the brown streaking on the sides of the house finch, which is always present. And again, notice the extent of color on the back, rump, and sides of the purple finch. As with the pine siskins and the female house finch, telling these birds apart gets a lot easier with time and practice. Like the pine siskin, purple finches do occur every winter in Tennessee, but they're often difficult to find except in eruption years, when entire flocks of them can be found throughout the state. With a heavy bill, purple finches can easily simply pry apart a black oil sunflower seed while moving it around with its tongue until the shell is removed and the nutritious kernel can be eaten. This tufted titmouse has a much smaller bill and must hold the seed against a hard surface and hammer it open. Now, in the western interior mountains of the United States, there's also another very closely related and very similar bird to purple finch, which also experiences eruption years. The Castens finch breeds at higher elevation than the purple finch and has a very limited range. But when resources get scarce, it too moves down slope and outward. This past winter of 2020-2021, Castens finches have been found well outside their normal winter ranges. This species has never yet been recorded in Tennessee, but who knows? Someday it might be, and if it has been here, it's been overlooked. The color on a male Castens finch is concentrated in the cap, which is often raised in a crest. The rest of the body is a paler pink overall than the head. It also has an even more ruler straight culmen than the purple finch, and the undertail coverts of a Castens finch are streaked, whereas the undertail coverts of purple finch is always pure white. Female Castens finches show the same bill structure and the same streaked undertail coverts. They are more thinly streaked overall than female purple finch, and both male and female Castens finch typically show a thin eye ring that's lacking in a purple finch. Fortunately for eBird reviewers, Castens finches and purple finches have very little to no range overlap, so you're only going to expect one in a given location most of the time. Next, we're going to look at an eruptive finch, which really brings the wow factor. Some birds are described in field guides as unmistakable. The Evening Grosbeak is definitely one of those birds. Evening Grosbeaks are brilliantly colored and sharply patterned in bold yellow, black, and white, even in the winter months. The thick yellowish bill is massive, easily explaining the bird's description as a grosbeak. But Evening Grosbeaks are in the finch family and not closely related to the familiar rose-breasted and black-headed grosbeaks, which are in the cardinal family, sometimes called the cardinal grosbeak family. Female evening grosbeaks are less dramatically colored than the males, with more of an overall gray-green color and less pronounced black and solid white in the wings. Males have a dramatic white in the wing and that bold yellow unibrow over their eye. As with pine siskins, they're very vocal, often heard before they're seen with a raspy call, and they can arrive in large groups. They forage on wild food like poplar cones, but love black oil sunflower seed at feeders. Evening grosbeaks were once much more common in winter in the South, but as with so many of our native bird species, their numbers have dropped greatly across their range. According to the North American Breeding Bird Survey, from 1966 to 2015, 97% of the eastern population of evening grosbeak has been lost. Think about that for a minute. 97%. It's so important for us to protect these birds that we cherish, native to North America, and little things that we can do, like making our windows bird-friendly and keeping our pet cats indoors, can make a huge difference in the recovery of these species. An even more rare visitor in eruption years comes from the very far reaches of the north, and that is the common redpoll. This species looks quite similar to the pine siskin and is often found traveling in flocks of siskins when they come south. So check those flocks of winter pine siskins carefully. Like pine siskins, common redpolls are heavily streaked and are very small, but their yellow bills are not quite as thin and pointed, and they have a distinctive black mask and their namesake, a red cap on the top of the head. The word poll means head, or the top of the head. When you take a poll or are polled, your head is counted. Adult males have a reddish wash across the breast. These birds only show up as far south as Tennessee every few years, but I personally had the incredible fortune to look out my window in November 2020 and see this female redpoll on my feeder. She is one of only 3 or 4 which have been reported this winter in the state, and she was the first one seen in Nashville for many years. Unfortunately, I don't have any video of this species yet, but I'm honored to have had one in my backyard. As we mentioned before, finches all have bills designed for seeds and nuts. There's one eruptive finch species and another very local resident of the high Tennessee mountains which has taken bill specialization to a bit of an extreme. The Red Crossbill and all crossbill species have evolved bills that are crossed into the perfect tool for prying open tight pine cones to get at the seeds inside. True to its name, the adult male Red Crossbill is red with dark wings. The female is a yellow color with a grayish dark wings. Notice the Castens Finch down on the left with the eye ring and the pink cap. This is not in Tennessee. And this is a young male red crossbill. In almost all bird species, young birds take on the color of the female until they mature. This bird is moving from the female yellow to an adult male red color. One type of red crossbill can be found year-round in the southern Appalachians, but in eruptive years, northern red crossbills can often come south as well. So can this bird, a white-winged crossbill. This is the only one I've ever seen in northern Minnesota. There are very few records of white-winged crossbill in Tennessee, and it's mostly before the 1980s. It's been a long time, but they can easily show up again. So if you see a crossbill with a white bar on its wing, you've got a really special bird. Lastly, if there's a holy grail of potential eruptive finches to Tennessee and the southeastern United States, it's this bird, the pine grosbeak. Like Evening Grosbeak, it's a very large finch, even larger. This bird has been reported only once in Tennessee, and experts don't all agree on the identification. But they do move south and west in eruptive years, so eventually we could see a winter here with pine grosbeaks. Like the Evening Grosbeak, both the bright pink male and the ochre yellow female are unmistakable. So there we have an overview of some winter finches, those which occur regularly and irregularly here in Tennessee, but which may be more common where you are. And we discussed the phenomenon of eruption in birds. If you enjoyed the programming, again, I hope that you'll click like and subscribe and share it with a friend. Thank you so much for watching. Good birding.